My name is Alina Carter. I am 22 years old and I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I consider myself a pretty determined person, especially when it comes to my education. I'm in college for a very demanding dual degree and I rely heavily on a stipend to keep going. Without that money, I would have no way to afford my classes, my books, or even basic living expenses because I am estranged from my family and I have a disability that makes working difficult. I work hard to keep my grades perfect, aiming for straight A's because I depend on my academic record to keep my scholarship, my future, and my independence intact. I started this semester with high hopes, but it all started to fall apart when I got assigned to a group project for one of my classes. This was one of those huge, complicated assignments. We had to write a detailed essay on a topic related to our field of study that we could choose ourselves, create a scientific poster about it, give a 30-minute presentation, and then be quizzed on the whole thing afterwards. We were given 6 weeks to complete the entire project, which seemed fine at first, but then I found myself in a group with two people who could not have been more different. One was a guy who I could tell genuinely cared, who was engaged and put in effort. He seemed like someone who was going to do his part without fail. The other was this guy I'll call dipshit. He was lazy from day one. We made a schedule early on, divided up our tasks clearly, and set check-in days to track our progress. Everything seemed on track until our very first check-in day. Dipshit arrived late, forgot his laptop, and made excuses. Then at the second check-in, he didn't show up at all. We were counting on him to analyze and compile some data he was supposed to have. Every time we asked him about it, he'd say he sent it the next day or he was almost done, but he never actually had anything finished. When we finally pressed him hard, he admitted he had done absolutely nothing, and most infuriatingly, he told us he simply wouldn't do any of it. He looked me straight in the eyes and said he didn't care about the grade because, in his words, you could fail 3 finals and still pass the course. He fully intended to just ride his luck, and if he failed, he didn't give a damn. I was furious, and I tried to explain that while I understood if he didn't care about his part, the project was a shared effort, and his refusal to do anything meant I would fail too. Failing would cost me my stipend, my ability to stay in school, everything I've worked so hard for. But he just shrugged and told me, well, it's not my problem that you're broke. That was the moment I decided I would do something. I let him be. I told my teammate we had to plan around him, and I moved ahead with our work. I stayed up late, doing all the research and writing dipshit's part of the essay myself, knowing full well he hadn't contributed anything. My teammate and I worked our butts off to put together a great poster and prepare a solid presentation. We didn't tell dipshit a thing about our progress. During the last few days, we showed our professor proof that dipshit refused to work and constantly missed meetings. The professor told us to document everyone's parts honestly, and he promised he would grade each person independently based on their actual contribution. We were feeling pretty good about our chances. Then one day before the presentation, dipshit suddenly texted the group chat asking what he was supposed to talk about. I responded plainly, as agreed before the project, everyone talks about what they wrote in the essay. That sent him into a panic. He started asking what he was supposed to say because all he had was a half-page mess of data that was wrong, and he hadn't brought his laptop to any of our meetings, so he couldn't access the shared files or even improvise. I told him, tough luck, figure it out, you had plenty of time. I knew he had no chance to fix anything at that point, especially since he never bothered to prepare anything meaningful. The morning of the presentation, I watched him stumble through his part. I had to go first because of how our segments were divided, so I introduced my section with confidence, explaining my research and setting the stage for our presentation. Dipshit went second, and honestly, it was painful. All he did was read what I had said, ramble aimlessly, add no new information, and waste 10 minutes just repeating numbers from the poster while mumbling furthermore, and so on, and throwing in ums and yes-sos. It was embarrassing to watch. My teammate, cool guy, went last, but the flow was completely disrupted because dipshit's rambling already killed the momentum. Cool guy added all the context and wrapped everything up, but the damage was done. During the Q&A, I answered all the questions directed at me, but whenever dipshit was asked anything, he started saying, that's part of Alina's research, even though he didn't understand the material. It was clear he hadn't done his part. I knew all the answers because I read and studied the entire project, but dipshit looked clueless. Watching him embarrass himself in front of the whole class and both professors was almost satisfying enough to make me forget my stress. We're still waiting for our grades, but I am almost sure I'll pass. My effort paid off. Dipshit, of course, failed to meet even the minimum requirements, and I couldn't help but feel a little gleeful knowing that my hard work exposed his laziness and incompetence. The whole ordeal was painfully awkward and cringeworthy, and I secretly wished I could have disappeared into the ground. That experience taught me that when people try to take advantage of others, sometimes the best revenge is simply showing everyone their true colors and letting them fail spectacularly in front of everyone they wanted to impress.